African trade bloc has absolutely no economic justification. He joins us now via Skype from Dakar, the capital of Senegal. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, first of all, the IMF says this will be an economic game changer for the African continent. And you're saying there's no justification for this. To still feel this way about this free trade deal?
Yeah. In fact, the idea of a common market for Africa has been advanced by let's say, leaders like Kwame Nkrumah. But what they said was something very clear. You could not organize the continent at an economic level without some political unity. So the basis for economic integration is political unity. And what they called the political unity was, for example, to have a continental army, to have one minister for foreign affairs, to have one common selling policy of our raw materials, and also to eliminate competition between Africans. But I think in the case of the African Continental Free Trade Area, it's not the vision of, let's say, Nkrumah and the other Pan-Africanists. It's a vision which say that we have to integrate through markets and afterwards we'll have political unity. It's a vision that says that we have to put African people, African workers into competition. And for me, it is clearly not the original vision of Pan-Africanism. It's something called Afro-liberalism. And generally, you see that everywhere the benefits of free trade have always been, let's say, overestimated. You take the case of South Africa. It's an industrial powerhouse in Africa, but inside South Africa, you know better than me, there are huge inequalities. And with free trade, inequalities will be much more, let's say, important within South Africa and between nations of Africa. And I don't think this was the view articulated by Nkrumah and others.
Well, what's the danger of launching it now?
In fact, there is no spontaneous industrialization. When Nkrumah was talking about industrialization, Nkrumah articulated this point of view at the continental level. And there was this idea of planification. You have to plan the industrialization at a continental level. And you know, when you industrialize, there will be some losers. And those losers have to be compensated. But without political unity, you could not compensate the losers. And at the end, all the people who lost with these dynamics of free trade, they will no longer be interested in uniting economically and politically. And you will see all those populist movements, rightist movements, and you will see, let's say, tensions between African countries. That's why without the firm foundation of political unity, you could not go very far in the, let's say, in economic integration.
Now, 54 out of all the 55 countries have now signed up to the deal, and Eritrea is the only country outstanding. Can the other countries go without them?
Yeah, because Eritrea is a very minor country, and I think they could start in next year the African Continental Free Trade Area without Eritrea. But what I have also to add is that there are many prerequisites which are not, let's say, filled for now. Because even the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, they say that investing more in, let's say, infrastructures to help the circulation of the goods have 4 times more impact than the dismantling of tariff barriers. And at the same time, we are going through African Continental Free Trade Area without Africans having the currency of their trade. Because what will happen? If my country, for example, Senegal, will have to import to Kenya, we will settle our exchanges in US dollars or maybe in euro. That means the growth of African trade will be dependent on the growth with, let's say, of other countries using dollars and euros, etc. That means our trade between African countries will be made dependent on the currency of other blocs. So it would have been interesting to have one, let's say, payment systems within the whole continent, and also one currency unit which will help to settle this trade. At the same time, we know that when we have to transfer money from one African country to another, the costs are very expensive, among the most expensive in the world. And that means if we do not solve that, that will also, let's say, be a handicap to African trade. And we have also to say that the banking sector in Africa everywhere is more or less dominated by foreign banks. And that means that this trade will be organized by foreign banks. And this could not be, I think, to the advantage of African countries. And at the same time, the extreme volatility of African currencies will, let's say, somehow create situations where some countries will just be able to, let's say, depreciate their currency to gain competitive advantage. That means we need also to have a coordination, continental coordination regarding our exchange rates. And all those prerequisites are not yet filled regarding the African Continental Free Trade Area.
I mean, speaking of such central coordination, as I've just mentioned, I mean, it takes us back to the debate over the United States of Africa, where where there are prospects of a single currency and a single economic bloc. And to date, it still hasn't seen the light of day. And there's been concerns over unfair trade practices, such as dumping, which could lead to which decision could lead to the lowering of exports by those countries. I mean, the sales of the country's exports below the cost of production. And I suppose then this will, Nigeria stands to get an unfair market share after signing this deal. So how do the other 53 countries circumvent around this?
I think these are issues which normally have to be tackled during the negotiations within the African Continental Free Trade Area. But I think what is much more worrying is the possibility for some countries to manipulate their exchange rate to gain competitive advantage. That means unless we have monetary coordination at the continental level, nobody could do anything against that. So that means there are many political prerequisites which are not yet filled. That's why the potential for a common market, could be, let's say, diminished. At the same time, I have to say that it's a big, let's say, free trade area, but the size of the 50 of the continent for now economically is similar to the size of France. So we do not have also to overestimate the potential of bringing African economies together. Of course, Africa will develop and Africa will be bigger than the French economy. But for now, the size of the African continent is the size of France, economically speaking.
You know, we've been speaking to quite a number of economists about the implications of the Chinese domination on the African continent, and there've been differing views with regards to how China will fare moving on after signing of this deal. What are your thoughts on Chinese dominance on the continent?
I think that with the current version of the African Continental Free Trade Area, Africa might become, let's say, a commercial periphery of China. It's possible. But if there is political unity and no more competition between African countries, things are decided, let's say, more or less at a continental level, yes, it is possible to have an emancipatory framework towards China and other powers of this world.
All right, Mr. Sylla, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time. That is a Senegalese economist, Ndongo Samba Sylla, speaking to us live via Skype from Dakar in Senegal. This is the Globe on SABC News. We'll have more news in a moment.